Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin, the show where I virtually invite people into the blog cabin to chat about life. And today we are chatting with Mike. He's the author of You Will Know Me by My Deeds. And it's actually a second book. And you wrote the first book, and now I want to go back and read the first book because the second book was so awesome. I'm like, oh, I missed out so much from the first book. So, Mike, you weren't always an author, though. You were other things. So tell us a little about yourself before we get into talking about the book.
Okay. Melissa, thank you so much for having me, by the way. It's a real pleasure. Yeah, so I joke with people and tell them I have a checkered past. I actually was a scientist for my professional career. I have a PhD in chemistry, but most of the focus of my doctoral work was computational quantum physics, which is in some ways would seem to be a far cry, if you will, from writing. But I think it suits me pretty well. You can't be a good scientist without having an insatiable curiosity, without loving research. And because I write historical fiction, research is a really, really important part of my writing. And you have to be able to grasp forensic concepts and things like that because I also write about crime. So while it might seem a little strange that there is a connection there, I think there's a pretty good one. And I've used a lot of the skills that I developed over the years as a scientist to benefit my writing.
I love that. And I will applaud you for getting your PhD. My son-in-law just got his PhD from Caltech in chemistry. So
Well,
I know how much work that is. And my daughter she's 1 year away from getting hers in environmental toxicology. I know how much work that is involved with a PhD. So why did you decide to just go off on another different tangent? And you said you liked the research base and everything, but then start writing historical fiction because I love it, historical fiction.
Yeah, so I've been writing my whole life, but in addition to science, history has always been one of my passions. I love reading about historical events. I love studying history. I particularly like the history of particular environments that I'm familiar with. So I'm a native of Atlanta. I was born and reared in Atlanta. Lived in New Jersey for a while. Actually had a place in California for a while. But there was a fairly well-known Atlanta historian named Franklin Garrett, who's passed away now. But I've told people that I would have loved in another life to have been sort of the Franklin Garrett of Atlanta. I've also done a fair amount of research into California history, which I also find fascinating. But yeah, it's a passion. Given that I love writing, and I've been writing since I was a little kid, avocationally, and given that I love history, historical fiction just made perfect sense to me.
Yeah, so you said that you researched a lot of California history. Do you think you have a book in you that will be based on the California history?
I do. I just wrote a blog for a blog site that my publicist just sent off yesterday, about how I was born in the South, I was reared in the South, but my heart is in California. I've spent a lot of time in Central California. Had a condo in Monterey for a while, and one of my regrets is that we sold the condo. I wish we still had it. I've actually been researching. I don't want to go into great detail because it's still sort of in incubating stage, if you will, but I've been researching some serial killings in California that actually have not gotten a lot of press. Obviously, there are some very famous California serial killers who have gotten quite a bit of press, but this particular story has not. So I'm playing around with the idea of maybe writing something. It would be my sixth book because I have 4 published books. I have a fifth, a nonfiction true crime book that I'm working on. So the California book will have to be pushed off a little bit into the future, but it will take me probably a year or 2 to research it, which is pretty common.
Yeah, I can imagine because there was a lot of detail in this book. And we're talking about serial killers, so we might as well just dive into the book and talk about Atlanta. The child murders. That's what this book is based upon. What made you decide to write about this?
Well, so I decided to write You Will Know Me by My Deeds for a couple of reasons. So you mentioned earlier there is a prequel. It's called The Devil You Knew. And I took The Devil You Knew to a certain point, but I like writing books that don't tie everything up in a nice bow at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I left a lot of things hanging in The Devil You Knew. The Atlanta child murders were alluded to in the first book, but I didn't go into great detail about them. I've been fascinated by the Atlanta child murders for a long time because based upon some fairly extensive research that I've done and that others have done, I am convinced that the individual who is serving time today did not kill all of the black children. And for those of your viewers who are not familiar with the Atlanta child murders, there was a series of over 24 murders of black children that occurred between 79 and 81, mainly boys. There were 2 girls, and there was an individual named Wayne Williams, was never tried or convicted of killing any of the black children, but he was tried and convicted of killing a couple of adults and went to prison and pretty much was convicted in the court of public opinion for killing all the black children. But again, as I said, based on my research, he may have been guilty of killing some of the children, but not all of them.
So that's why my next question. You said based on your research, what can you tell us about what you uncovered in some of the research?
So I don't want to tell too much because it may give some things away that are critical to the plot of the book. But there was one particular journalist who interviewed an informer who is fictionalized in my book, but much of the detail regarding the informer's work is true. This informer was embedded with a Klan family in Atlanta who, according to the informer, had a stated mission of killing 1 black child a month in order to foment race riots in the city. Mm. The informer and the journalist's allegations are that when the authorities, the powers that be, got word of this, and these are allegations, but when the authorities got word of this, they were scared to death that indeed, if word got out that the Klan or Klan group was responsible for killing these children, that there would indeed be race riots in the city. At the time, the story got some press. It actually got a little press on a couple of local TV stations, but it never went anywhere. And I believe there's a strong case for the allegations that the authorities did whatever they needed to do to kill it. The prior mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, actually ordered that the case be reopened and that DNA analysis be done. Bear in mind that 79, 80, 81, there was not much sophistication at all at that time in the way of DNA analysis. But she ordered that the case be reopened. She is no longer the mayor, and really nothing has become of it.
Wow.
Yeah. One of the things I love about writing historical fiction is, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. In my 4th book, and I know we're here to talk about You Will Know Me by My Deeds, but my 4th book is called Muzzle the Black Dog. And much of that book is about the Eric Rudolph, the Centennial Olympic Park bomber, and his relationship with his brother. And there's some things that his brother did that were just so unbelievable that are incorporated into that book. But if you just read a book of fiction and didn't do your research and endeavor to find out that the story is true, you would think, yeah, this is so crazy. It's just too outlandish for me to believe.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I love. I love when an author such as yourself writes something that's historical fiction, but it's based on some history so that it encourages the readers to go research for themselves. And that's what I did, is
Yes.
I researched a little bit more. I love when authors do that because not only helps, it entertains you, but also educates you. And I think that's the perfect combination of the two.
Sure. Yeah, I have maybe a somewhat unorthodox view of what I call a contract between a writer and a reader. I certainly I don't write, I don't know, casual beach novels. I think I love reading them, but that's not what I write. I love the concept of a contract, an implicit contract between a writer and a reader. And the writer is expected to do his or her homework and challenge the reader and cause the reader to want to go, learn more. And there's an implied obligation on the part of the reader to, to endeavor to learn more. And I love that concept of this implied contract.
Most of your stories are based in Atlanta. Is that because that's the subject matter that you know? Because you just talked about that one serial killer that was here in your fourth book, and then you're talking about this in this book. Is that what you know, or is it you just like, okay, I'm so fascinated by these stories, I have to write them?
It really is that I'm fascinated by the stories. There is something about the South, and there's something about Southern Gothic crime stories that I think is somewhat unique. Now, mind you, Muzzle of the Black Dog, my fourth book, much of that book takes place in the woods outside of Marble, North Carolina, not far from where Eric Rudolph was discovered. The essence of that book is really in the fictional thread that runs through the book. Does not take place in Atlanta. It takes place in North Carolina. But it's still the South. It's still what I know. And, and I guess to some degree, it's been more within my comfort zone. I mean, my first book, Dead Beckoning, is a historical novel about an unsolved murder from 1895 from Atlanta.
Wow, you went way back there with that research.
I went way back, and I spent several years researching that book. Yeah, so I have a lot of resources here. I have a lot of anecdotal experience because I grew up here. So that certainly helps, but I do not have any, I don't have any reluctance at all about shifting my sights to California, for example, and writing about things that took place out there. The good thing is, because I love California so much, it just means that I'll have to spend more time out there to do research.
I love that. California is beautiful. California gets such a bad rep, but it's such a beautiful state.
I agree.
We need to take a brief commercial break, but when we come back, you will be reading part of your book, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Here we go.
People welcomed me, and they knew the pain of the journey that we'd been on because they'd been there too.
Other Parents Like Me is an online community, peer-led, for parents with kids struggling with mental health and or substances.
It's a space that's safe. Feels like I can actually share what's going on.
We offer 15 daily support groups per week and live speaker talks on Thursdays, as well as a monthly expert panel.
We also have a resource hub that has a toolkit. This includes over 1,000 articles, podcasts. There's a glossary with the most recent and relevant terms. And we have a directory that's been vetted.
The overwhelming feeling when we're sitting in a meeting and I'm telling my story and I see others shaking their head, tears falling, they understand this roller coaster and they're along for the ride.
And we are back with Mike. Mike is going to be reading You Will Know Me by My Deeds. And Mike, I forgot to tell you this before we went on, but I removed myself, so it's focused on you. So I'm still here.
Okay.
Because I did that one time and they're like, where? And somebody's like, where did you go? And I forgot to tell you that before we came on. So the floor is all yours.
Okay, great. I'm going to read an excerpt from the third chapter of the book, but I thought it might be good just for a minute for me to provide some context. So all of my books involve a fictional story that's sort of woven on top of and around and through a true historical event. So You'll Know Me by My Deeds basically tells the story of two principal protagonists, Billy and Cynthia Tarwater. Without going into great detail, because I don't want to give away anything from the first book, The Devil You Knew, Cynthia Tarwater went through some very traumatic experience when she was 14 years old in the first book. And she is still living many years later. She's now an adult. She's still living the trauma of what she went through. as an adolescent. So that's a little bit of context behind what I'm going to read. So this is the beginning of chapter 3. Tuesday, December 15th, 1981. The first thing Cynthia saw when she woke was the note on the nightstand, scrawled in blue on a Chinette napkin. Can't sleep, going in early, maybe home late, love you, Billy. She rubbed her eyes. It was 6:15. She stumbled into the bathroom, quickly disrobed, and hopped into the shower. The surging water, cold at first but hot to the touch within seconds, pummeled her face and splashed off her shoulders. The stall filled with hot steam. She breathed deep and took it in. Her body absorbed the heat like a sponge. She cherished these brief times of solitude, freed from the imperatives of the outside world, before the kids roused and took command of her attention, before the preoccupations of the day, before anything really except her private shower thoughts. Most mornings, those thoughts ran from the capricious to the sublime, gently nudging her passions and inspiring her to seize the moment. But this morning, her ponderings quickly ran to a darker, a more somber place. Gibran wrote that the strongest souls emerge out of suffering. The most massive characters are seared with scars. She instinctively ran her hand down the back of her thigh and across the snag of scarred flesh, a forever vestige left from an adolescent girl's plight for survival, from the twisted, redemptive soul of a sick man. Some scars are visible to the world, but the ones you can't see, those are the deepest. Cynthia had learned to overcome the unsettling feeling that Billy sometimes stared at it when they were intimate. He never spoke a word of it. She toweled off and dressed. The most massive characters are seared with scars.
Wow. The massive characters are seared with scars. Not that they are scarred, they are seared. I love that. It's like seared in your memory that this happened.
Yes.
So obviously Cynthia has a really troubled past. We don't want to get into too much, but how much research did you do on Cynthia's character, especially for the first book and for this book?
Fair amount. The first, just another little bit of detail about the first book. The first half of the first book really is sort of a coming of age story. It takes place in 1963. And there's a lot of me in that first half of that book, and a lot of Billy Tarwater in me. My characters really do live inside of me. And I remember quite well the girls going missing when I was young. And so I did a fair amount of research into that. Now, I will tell you, though, that Cynthia is a fictionalized character, but based upon things that I remember from my childhood. I certainly did a lot of research to better understand what was going on at the time and how it would have impacted my fictionalized character, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it would make sense, because a lot of times when authors write something and it's historical fiction, they kind of give a big grand leeway of something that actually did not happen during that time, and you're like, wait a second, this is not correct, historically correct. So I like the fact that you did that research to make sure you were right on the money with that.
One of my biggest, I guess, fears is that I will get something wrong, something that is readily researchable, readily in the public domain, that I will get wrong, and that somebody will call me out on it. That's why I do so much background research to make sure I get a lot of those details right.
So for this particular book, can you put a time on how many hours you spent or how many months you spent over the years for the research?
Well, I spent about 9 months researching this book, but I have to tell you that some of the research that I did for the prior book certainly benefited the writing of this book, because as I mentioned earlier, I did allude to the Atlanta child murders in the prior book, and so I benefited from that when I endeavored to start writing this book. But probably about 9 months total, which is pretty typical, except for my first book, Dead Beckoning, which was the late 19th century work of historical fiction. I spent years actually researching that book.
Wow.
Yeah.
So take me through a typical, like, once you get a topic in your mind, how do you go about doing the research? Because I know a lot of people are interested in how you research this, because they're like, there's only so much you can get from a public library. You have to go some deep dives. So how did you go about doing that?
Well, one of the things that I do a lot is I read newspaper articles. You can learn so much from newspaper articles. Interestingly, when I started researching Dead Beckoning quite a few years ago now, I did not have the wealth of information available to me that's available to me on the internet now. And I would spend hours at a research library here in Atlanta actually reading newspaper articles on microfilm.
Wow, I remember those days.
Now it's pretty much all available on the internet. So I do a lot of that. I do a lot of reading of contemporaneous books, both nonfiction and fiction, because you can learn a lot by reading novels from a given period. You can learn a lot about the zeitgeist, if you will, the culture of the period and things like that. But you can't necessarily, you can't get a good command of the facts, but you can certainly get a feel that will help place you in the moment. The one thing that's really important to me is that whatever I'm writing, I have to immerse myself in that time and place, and I have to live with the characters, whether they are real or fictionalized. So the other thing I do, I will tell you, when I was writing You Will Know Me by My Deeds, there's some old viaducts in the old part of Atlanta that are being completely renovated now. And because you've read the book, you remember some things that took place under some of the viaducts. I went down there. I spent time down there. I'm just wandering around because I had to be there. I had to feel like I was there. When I was writing Dead Beckoning, even though it takes place in the late 19th century, I spent a lot of time wandering around in downtown Atlanta streets where this particular individual, who's one of the key people in the book, where he was killed, gunned down on his way to work one morning. I think I probably attract attention at times, just sort of wandering around aimlessly, and people are probably thinking, "What is he doing?" But it's critical for me anyway. It's critical to my writing to be able to do that.
Do you also talk to people who might have happened to be, like, this particular book is based on the Atlanta child murders? Did you have to talk to victims, or not victims, because obviously the victims are gone, but families of the victims and things like that, or to avoid that a little bit?
I did not I read interviews with the families of victims. And by the way, several of the victims' family members are also convinced that Wayne Williams did not kill their children. I did talk to people who remembered the events because I wanted to get their opinions about things and their take on the way things were at that time. But I did not talk to family members.
I will say there was one thing that I wrote down in our little notes I sent you, was the GBI, because now, since Will Trent has come on Hulu, I see Will Trent and GBI. I know what GBI is now, but before I didn't know what that was. So I thank you for putting that in the book, because I'm like, I know what that is.
Yeah. So at first, the police did not believe there were pattern murders taking place. When the first few children were killed, they thought, yeah, this is just typical of what goes on, especially in poor black neighborhoods in Atlanta. And they really discounted it. It wasn't until several black children had been killed under similar circumstances that they began to think, okay, there could be a pattern here. And the GBI got involved, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation got involved, and then ultimately the FBI got involved as well. And the journalist who researched all of this and who interviewed the informer, his allegation is that all three of those entities, the Atlanta police, the GBI, and the FBI, were pretty terrified that if word got out that the Klan was behind this, it would wreak great havoc in the city.
Yeah, and honestly, that's something that you really need to look at, because you saw what happened when George Floyd, when all that happened, went down with George Floyd. So in one way it's great to protect, but in another way it's not so great if they think it's killed somebody that really didn't, that's really innocent.
Yeah, exactly. And just one other little thing about the book, which because you've read it. At the very beginning of the book, somebody is out to get Cynthia and maybe Billy as well. And they don't know whether it is because of related to what happened back in '63, which is in the first book, or whether it's related to the fact that Billy is a newspaper man and on his own time, against the wishes of his editor, is digging and digging and digging and pursuing this backstory about the Klan. So they don't know who is out to get, whether somebody's out to get Cynthia in order to get to Billy. They just don't know at this point what's going on.
I will say, I would love to see more of, oh my gosh, not the little boy that ends up staying with Billy and Cynthia. I would love to see more about his mom's journey into how everything happened, or his family journey.
You may.
Good, because I think that's a great backstory right there. I mean, because I did not expect that to happen, and I'm not giving it away. It's a twist in the book, but I did not expect that all to come out. I was like, wow.
I didn't expect it to happen either. So
I love that.
One little thing about me and about my writing. In the writing world, they often refer to plotters and pantsers. So plotters plot out a story. Pantsers write sort of by the seat of their pants. I am definitely a pantser. My characters talk to me. I commune with them. I talk to them. My wife, I think I worry her sometimes. Okay. But my books very much are character driven, and they tell me where to take the story. This little boy you're referring to, and yeah, I want to be careful. I don't want to give too much away, but this little boy who played a minor role earlier in the book, I never expected him to end up becoming such an important part of the book. I love him. I feel a kinship with him. He reminds me, although in some ways he's totally different, he reminds me a lot of young Billy Tarwater in 1963 in the first book. And yes, we haven't seen the last of him.
Good. Because I was like, he just came out of it, when, like you said, the very beginning, it was like you just minor character, then all of a sudden he becomes major at the end, and you're like, I didn't see that one coming.
Yes.
And we're not giving anything away. We're intriguing the readers to want to read it.
If a lot of this book is about sort of like self-discovery and redemption and heroism where you least expect it, he embodies that. He really does.
I agree.
And I love him. I just absolutely love him. I love most of my characters, not all, but I love him. I don't love Leonard Seymour, but I love him, and he is still speaking to me, and he's saying, "Hey, what are you going to do with me?" Because I don't want to fade into the woodwork.
Well, good. I cannot wait to see what you come out with. Do you think it'll be something based on another historical fiction? Do you think it's going to be based on another case, or do you think you're going to continue on with this case?
I don't know at this point. It may be something shorter too. I just don't know. My fourth book is a novella, actually. I think I finally learned how to write a short book. And I joke with people and tell them that I didn't set out to write a shorter book. It's just that my characters in that book were not as long-winded. It may be shorter. I just don't know. I just know that I've got to do something with him because he means too much to me. He means too much to my readers. And I can't just let him go. I can't let him go.
Yeah. He endeared himself to me as well. That's the reason why I was asking, like, is there some way that you're going to, because it feels like his story is not ended yet.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
I'm glad. I'm glad there's something coming down the pipe.
Yes.
So you talk about these characters that you fall in love with and you live with them and you get engrossed in their life and everything. Are there some characters that you're like, whoa, I got to take a break from this because this is too dark, too heavy a character? There's some that you're like, oh, I just love these characters so much. I want to continue on with them.
I think every one of my characters, whether good or quote bad, they are all, I know this sounds weird, but they're all living, breathing human beings who have good qualities. Some of them have really bad qualities.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's true of most people. Well, even the characters in my books who do dastardly things, I still find them intriguing. I still find them worthy of probing and learning more about, worthy of getting to know. I don't think I have any characters that I find so abhorrent that I can't, at least to one degree or another, endeavor to better understand them. And as you know, in this book, there are some really bad people. Would I want to go out, and have a beer with them? Probably not, but I'm perfectly okay getting to know them better and getting to know their complexities and trying to better understand what drives them and what makes them the way they are. Because a lot of people who do bad things, there's some underlying root cause that has resulted in their behavior that they might or might not have any control over. Now, the interesting thing about, and again, I don't want to get too much away, but the interesting thing about this little boy that you referred to, I just love the fact that he was able to overcome that.
So how do you shut your brain off when you're writing? If you're living with these characters and you already said your wife is worried about you when you're writing these books. So apparently by your laugh, you don't shut your brain off.
I don't really. Well, I will tell you, I have 4 granddaughters ranging in age from 1 to almost 4. They certainly force me to turn my brain off when I'm around them. I can turn my brain off, but sometimes when I'm trying to go to sleep at night, my characters are talking to me, I can't turn my brain off. But, look, you just have to learn to sort of compartmentalize it. I don't know, you just figure out how to deal with it.
I can't even imagine. I mean, I'm in the process now of writing a book because I had one come out, but I'm in the process of writing another one, and I can't even get my brain to even focus on writing yet because everything else is pinging off my brain. So how do you compartmentalize being able to go in and just sit down and write and not have to worry about anything else that's going on in your life?
So the interesting thing is I'm pretty good at tuning out everything around me. I don't have a particular time that I write anymore. I used to get up really, really early in the morning and write. But I can write sitting in a Starbucks. I can write sitting in my office here. I split my time between Midtown Atlanta, right in the middle of the city, and a little town in North Georgia called Blue Ridge, which is very quiet and very idyllic. I can tune things out as well right here in the middle of the city as I can in the mountains. I don't have to have seclusion or anything like that. I do have to have a little bit of, I'll call it decompression time, to just get in the mental framework to write. But I'm pretty good at just tuning stuff out. I will tell you right now, I am in a little bit of, I don't want to get off too much on a tangent, but I'm in a little bit of an odd place right now in that the 2 projects I have going on at the moment don't involve historical fiction writing. I am actually writing a film adaptation of my 4th book, Muzzle the Black Dog, because a lot of people have encouraged me to do so. So I'm in the process of converting that book into a screenplay, which is a totally different process, a totally different dynamic, and it's totally foreign to me. And it's not allowing me to really let my characters speak to me in a way, because it really is more about the mechanical process of figuring out how to convert a pre-existing book into a film. And then the other thing I'm working on is a proposal. I'm reaching out to agents to try to generate interest in a nonfiction true crime book, which will be my 5th book, about a murder that someone I knew when I was 17, that actually is what set me on the path of writing about crime in the first place.
Oh, wow.
So I'm eager to get back into communing with my characters, whichever characters I'm communing with, and actually writing some new stuff. and the little boy and You Will Know Me by My Deeds may very well be front and center for that. I don't know yet.
So how do you balance the multiple writing projects? Because you just said screenplay, and then you're in the process of doing the true crime one. So how do you balance it, your writing time? Or is there certain days you're like, I'm going to write this, or is it just whatever day you get up, you feel like you're going to write something?
It's when I get up. I generally will devote a day to something. Because it takes me a while to get settled in and, like I said, sort of decompress. I typically the day before, the night before, I sort of plan out the next day, and I'll decide, okay, tomorrow I am going to just really get heads down and work on the screenplay, for example, and that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to try to just put the other stuff aside. Now, sometimes it creeps in, and my plans change a little bit. I think that works pretty well for me.
Yeah. Well, our time is almost up, Mike. Is there anything that you want to share that we haven't hit on, or maybe something that we hit on that you would like to reiterate? The floor is yours.
I guess the only thing I would say is that I'm eternally grateful to my readers and my fans, and I hope that they will, share my love of writing with other people. I strive to create highly unique, non-formulaic stories. And I love the fact that I get feedback from my writers every day about how much they love my books. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that every day. Yeah.
So let's talk about where people can find you. First of all, I've got up on the screen. You can find your book. I'm going to actually link all your books in the show notes because you've talked about all of them.
Thank you.
I've got You Will Know Me by My Deeds. You can grab it on Amazon, but where else can you get it besides Amazon?
Oh, you can buy it on Barnes & Noble. You can buy it from most, not that it would be necessarily stocked, but you could probably buy it from your local bookstore because they can order it. And you can buy it from bookshop.org, which is, I don't know whether you know bookshop.org, but it is a answer to Amazon. It's a consortium of independent bookstores.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and they're obviously Amazon is the big player in the space, but it is an online portal. I think it's bookshop.org. Yes, it's an online portal where you can buy books. And what you do is you go on to the portal and you choose your bookstore of choice. And when you order a book online, then that bookstore gets credit for it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That helps.
And I believe all four of my books are available on bookshop.org. Yeah. And also writer, Mike Cobb writer, all one string.com. And if you go to the website on the homepage up in the top right-hand corner, there are links to all of my social media. And I'm pretty prolific on, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, BookBub, Goodreads, YouTube. I've got some YouTube videos.
I love that.
Well, I have to tell you just very quickly, I have a wonderful, wonderful young woman in California who handles all of the social media for me because I don't understand about 90% of it. And she's 20 something and she does understand it. And I'm grateful for her. Yes.
Yep. There are times when I have to get my daughters to help me with that as well.
Yeah.
So I totally get you on that one 100%.
Yes.
So Mike, thank you so much for writing the book. And thank you for letting me know that the little boy is going to come back someplace sometime soon,
yes.
Hopefully, because that's one of the characters that I was really endeared by. At the end, I was like, man, what happened?
Yeah. So was I. Yeah.
So thank you for writing the book. Thank you for coming on and for sharing your story.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Guys, I will share in the show notes all Mike's books as well as where you can buy his books, the website, everything else. Until then, keep reading and go grab this book because I'm telling you, you will love this book. Until next time, bye, guys.